Welcome to Urban Sanctuary's Sunday Gathering Time. My guest today is Janet Childs, one of the founding members of the Bill Wilson Center for Living with Dying, which will be 45 years old in February next year. And Janet was an original part of that group, a founding member of that group. And so her vast experience and her heart for this work is truly enduring. Janet is also the director of the Bay Area Critical Incident Stress Management Team. And given the times we are living in, you can imagine how busy they are. They do regional support. Janet helps train teams to go into difficult situations that happen in communities and debrief that together. And so the work she's doing right now is so important to the times we're living in. So Janet, I'm so grateful to have you with us today. You want to say hi to the Urban Sanctuary community?
I would love to. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here with each and every one of you. You are doing amazing work on the front lines, and I thank you for holding the spiritual energy for all that we are going through.
So I'm so Thanks, happy Janet. To be here. Wow. Thank you so much for your time today. And so I wanted to just, you have spent a lifetime supporting people going through all kinds of grief and loss. You've supported me at important times in my life. So I'm so grateful for your friendship over the years. But so you've spent your life supporting a lot of people through grief and loss. And so what has your experience taught you about grief? This is not something we talk a lot about in our culture. And so what would you want to say to us today about what you've learned?
Well, you know what, Dana, that is exactly why we started the Center for Living with Dying in 1976, because we don't talk about grief. And yet grief is our universal human experience, whether it's through death-related grief or some kind of loss or change. Grief is our natural response to any loss or change, and it is something that we have found even more recently has been validated by studies done by scientists that if we do it together rather than alone, the healing and the recovery from it and the building of the new meaning of it will flow a lot easier. So it begs us to discuss grief and to honor it with each other. We have a tradition at the Center for Living with Dying, actually started by one of our responders who brought in a candle to our critical incident stress management team meeting. And he said, I'm lighting this candle for the child I couldn't save. I'm lighting this candle for my partner who got hurt, and I'm lighting this candle for me. And so he started us on the tradition of lighting the candle, which is the symbol of all of the light that we all can bring, each of our unique lights, to the issue of grief and loss and change and trauma. Because it is a human experience. It is a universal experience. And when we acknowledge it, it literally changes the dynamics. So I'm going to light the candle for our urban ministry community and for you, Dana, who has, fearlessly led us through so many incredible evolutions of different programs where we're responding to the community. And when we talk about grief and loss, any change or loss, that means the loss of a relationship, the loss of a pet, which is another underrated loss, which can be incredibly devastating. Yeah. In these times, we are dealing with 360 grief. That's kind of a coined term that I made up. When this started, the pandemic, COVID-19 started in March. And when we were sheltering in place, I realized that 360 grief, we are going through, everything we do is informed by being, altered by COVID-19. So just the acknowledgement that we are dealing with 360 grief is huge. And when we can share that with each other, and when we can bring our unique light to it, it lightens the load. And, grief shows up in so many different ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, mentally. It shows up in every dimension of our being. And when it is acknowledged, when we have an opportunity to express it, when we can do an action step behind it, and then reconnect to the new meaning that it has brought to our life, we bring healing. Now, I'm not saying that we take away your pain. We don't. In fact, the Center for Living with Dying services are there to help you walk through the grief, empower you to make meaning out of it. But we don't claim to take away the pain, because the pain is the price we pay for love. It's the price we pay for connection.
You know, I wonder, some people are afraid to go near to their grief or to embrace it because they think it's kind of depressing. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's concerned that that might make them more depressed?
Absolutely. And I can't promise that it won't necessarily bring up more feelings and make you might feel more sad. You might feel more guilty. You might feel more, depressed. That could be a word that we could use. But what we found is that when grief is acknowledged, it gives it more space. And so we can determine how we want to acknowledge it. We do have power. We don't have power over what happens to us many times. Events occur in our life. We don't have that power to necessarily change it or alter it, but we can change our response to it. And a beautiful author that I read when I was in high school, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, who is a powerful influence on my life, said we cannot control the events that happen to us always, but we can control our response to it. So how we control our response to it is you can take a look at your grief, pay attention to, listen for your grief in the way that works for you. For some people, it's diving right in and getting to the heart of the feelings. For some, it's being able to talk about it in an intellectual way first. The key thing is that you have choice and you have control over how you deal with your grief. And I think that step of acknowledgement literally changes the biochemistry of our body. And what I mean by that is it literally boosts our immune system. So if I say, this incident hurt, this incident sucked, this was hard to go through, our body and our mind are in agreement. The body literally boosts our immune system and literally gets what we call the good stress hormones flowing through our system, and we can respond in a much more better integrated way. When we say, oh, no big deal, I'm just going to put it in my backpack and move on, that's huge. Because what it does is it gives us that opportunity, where we're, not able to really deal with it because we've minimized it. And when we've minimized it, it just goes into what we call our backpack of cumulative grief. And there it stays. And there it stays.
And in fact,
absolutely. I'd like to invite us all, to first stretch. If you're on Zoom, as many of us are, let's stretch and let's, take a nice deep breath. Yes. Because our body is always going to tell us the truth where we're at. The body's always going to tell us the truth. And what I'm going to invite us to during our little time together that we have, that we take off the backpack. And what I mean is it's the present situations or incidents or, issues that we're worried about. And it's also our past, both personal and professional, critical incidents we've gone through and grief. I'm just going to invite us to take it off. And so I'm just going to have you do this motion, take off the backpack and put it right to the side. I know you'll probably all pick it up later, but for right now, let's be in the present moment with each other and acknowledging that we have probably gone through much grief. So let's just be with each other right now in the fullness of ourselves and acknowledge we've gone through a lot and we're going through a lot. And that actually relaxes. Oh, we're going through a lot and now we're going through a lot together. And that's going to help.
Yes. And I led some grief groups when I was a chaplain a number of years ago. So when you were talking about how it opens up a spaciousness when you acknowledge it, it made me remember that I had not all of them, but I had a few grief groups where we laughed so much because part of what we found is just creating that spaciousness and acknowledging the way that we were feeling would open up our whole range of feelings, you know, because once you start to tamp feelings down, you tamp the good ones down too. They kind of always get tamped down.
Yes.
And so creating that spaciousness, I mean, and sometimes people would look at each other and go, I kind of feel kind of guilty that we're laughing in this green room. But I just feel, some of them would say, I feel a certain amount of lightness having shared this with others and all. And so how, you know, part of what I'm hearing these days too, related to the fact that we're collectively experiencing so much common trauma and loss and grief. How do we grieve? You know, part of this, some of us know how to do grief rituals individually related to things that happen to us in our lives, but how do we grieve collectively these days? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think we do our ceremonies and rituals and everything that we can do. So, for example, for almost 35 years, we have been doing at the Center for Living with Dying what we call our Light of Light ceremony. And this year we're going to be doing it virtually, but it's a community ceremony where we acknowledge and honor our grief and also honor our love that goes beyond the grief. And so the power of this is when we acknowledge and honor the love, you know, we then can reclaim meaning. And I think the key with community is knowing that you are not alone.
How powerful.
So it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to thank you publicly here in front of others just for the life of service that you've given to bring healing into, so I can't even imagine, if you look back over those 45 years, Janet, how many lives you've touched. So today I wanted that you offered that you might close us with a song now.
I would love to. And what comes to me is I'd like to sing a song that I wrote many years ago, and it's called I Light a Candle. For the broken-hearted and grieving, I light this candle for you. For the lost and all alone, I light this candle for you. I light this candle. I light this candle for you. For the hungry and the cold, I light this candle for you. For the deep night of the soul, I light this candle for you. I light this candle. I light this candle for you. Enciendo, enciendo, enciendo una vela para ti. Enciendo, enciendo, enciendo una vela para ti. For the healing in the giving that makes us all one. For the promise of the rainbow shining like the sun, we light this candle. We light this candle for you. Encendemos una vela para ti. Encendemos una vela para ti. This candle is for you.
Janet, you have brought so much light into our lives in these few minutes. So your offering is very real to us. Thank you for the gift of it. And
Thank you.
thank you for sharing this journey with us. It is such a gift to know that sometimes when we're not together all the time, that we're each still there in our places of holding these spaces. So our love and our blessings and our own healing prayers go with you for your strength in this time as well. Okay?
Thank you. I will take it and take it in, and please take in all of my love for you.
Thank you, Janet.